A very good afternoon and a warm welcome to all gathered here for the national webinar organized by the Department of Postgraduate Studies and Research in Mathematics, St. Aloysius College, Autonomous, Mangaluru. It is indeed an honor to have amongst us our resource person, Professor Vittal Rao, Consultant, IISc Bangalore, Dr. Praveen Martis SJ, the Principal, St. Aloysius College, Autonomous, Mangaluru, Dr. Richard Gonsalves, Director, Loyola Center for Research and Innovation, St. Aloysius College, Autonomous, Mangaluru. On behalf of the PG Department of Mathematics, I welcome you all academic aspirants to this webinar. As we begin our program, let us seek God's blessing. I request all the participants to be in an attitude of prayer. Dear God, we praise and thank you for this beautiful day. We come to you this hour asking for your blessings and help as we are gathered together virtually. We pray for your guidance in the matters at hand and ask that you would show us how to conduct our work with spirit of joy and enthusiasm. Give us the desire to find ways to excel in our work. Help us to work together and encourage each other's excellence. We make this prayer in your name. Amen. Now, I request Dr. Richard Gonsalves to address the gathering.
Thank you, Madam. Respected Principal, Reverend Dr. Praveen Martis SJ, Resource Person of the Day, Professor Vittal Rao, Head of the Department of Postgraduate Studies in Mathematics of our college, Madam Anupriya, faculty members, and all the participants in this national webinar. At the very outset, let me congratulate the Department of Postgraduate Studies in Mathematics for organizing this national webinar on such an important and interesting topic. We are really fortunate to have Professor Vittal Rao, a renowned mathematician from Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, as a resource person. I thank Professor for accepting to be the resource person of today's national webinar. Mathematics is a science of numbers, quantities, geometry, and forms. Arithmetic, algebra, geometry, trigonometry, calculus, graph theory, topology, etc. come to our mind when we speak about mathematics. One name strikes to us, that is of Srinivasan Ramanujan, was the Indian mathematician who made substantial contribution to the field of mathematics. Though he died at a very young age of 32, he made a significant contribution in different fields of mathematical analysis, number theory, infinite series, etc. Our college is also known for the mathematics and mathematics teaching. We had a well-renowned Professor Krishnamurthy, who had written books, and I too read the book during my PUC days. Then K.R. Upadhyay sir, and then Bosco sir. These were really contributed significantly for the growth of our college. St. Aloysius College today is an autonomous institution giving education to more than 6,800 students at both UG and PG level. We have about 20 postgraduate programs, including one in mathematics. Carl Friedrich Gauss, one of the greatest mathematicians, said, mathematics is the queen of science and number theory is the queen of mathematics. Therefore, mathematics is there in every field of science. And it is a very important branch of science. One must have inclination to learn more and more of mathematics. Therefore, our PG department, which is running for the last 11 years, is doing very well in the college, and they have organized this webinar. I wish all this webinar all the best, and all the participants, I request them to make good use of this webinar and ask questions, clarify that doubt, and get the maximum out of the resource person. I wish the webinar all success. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now, I request Ms. Anupriya Shetty, Head of the Department of Postgraduate Studies and Research in Mathematics, to introduce our resource person.
A very good afternoon to everyone present here. I'm honored to introduce Professor R. Vittal Rao, the resource person for today's webinar. Professor R. Vittal Rao has an MSc degree in mathematics from Mysore University and PhD degree in mathematics from Purdue University, USA. He was a faculty in the Department of Mathematics at IISc Bengaluru for more than 3 decades and served as a professor and chairman of the department. Since his retirement, he is associated with the Department of Electronic Systems Engineering at IISc. He has held visiting faculty positions at Purdue University and Iowa State University, USA, and was a visiting scientist at the International Center for Theoretical Physics at Trieste, Italy. He also was associated with the Department of Civil and Hydraulic Engineering, the Department of CSA at IISc, and the Department of Mathematics at IIT Madras. He is specialized in the areas of analysis, linear algebra, and applications of mathematics. He is the recipient of the Teaching Excellence Award at IISc. As I have read and heard from his students and colleagues at IISc, he is known for his ability to make a complex mathematical concept seem very simple. He is an exemplary teacher and a researcher in mathematics. The motive behind organizing this webinar was to encourage the young minds to take up higher studies in mathematics. And when we approached Professor Rao for the same, he readily agreed, for which we are very grateful to him. Now, without any further delay, we shall begin with the session. Participants kindly note, during the session, participants' mics will be muted and you can unmute yourself only after the session for queries. And also you can post your questions in the chat box. The feedback link will be posted in the chat box after the talk. Thank you. Now I request Professor Vittal Rao to take over.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, my sincere thanks to all the people in the college, the principal, the director, the head of the department, and all faculty for giving me this opportunity to talk to you this afternoon. I have chosen a very peculiar topic. I will explain to you what the topic is, and before that, let me try to share the screen. Okay, I belong to the old generation where we used to write on a blackboard with a chalk. Now I have to get used to all these modern gadgets. The pandemic has started many lessons, and this is one of them. I will try to now share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes, sir. The screen is visible.
Okay. So I have titled, I'll straight away get into my talk. I'll try to restrict myself to 50 minutes to 1 hour. The title is $1 Million Problems in Mathematics That Are Not Millennium Problems. First of all, I should explain what millennium problems are and what this $1 million problem means. And why am I saying $1 million problem that are not millennium problems? This is a very general talk. Anybody can follow this talk. There is no need for not even high level, any great mathematical background. Simple high school background will be enough to understand the problem. Okay, so I'm going to look at two such problems. I will first introduce about why I chose this topic. I asked Sanupriya, what should I talk about when she requested me to give a talk. She asked me to talk about some unsolved problems. Then it was not clear how I am going to talk about unsolved problems in 1 hour, because it will require a lot of technical background and all. And so finally, I decided to choose these two problems, which I'm going to talk about, mainly because they are simple to state. But of course, they are hard to solve because they have not yet been solved. So these are problems that have not been solved yet. Okay, as one of the British writers, in fact, if you catch hold of any book of Ian Stewart, read it. He writes beautifully and it is very interesting. And as he says in his book, mathematicians all have a great habit of posing many challenging problems, and many of them remain unsolved for several years, sometimes decades, sometimes even several centuries. And suddenly some young fellow appears and then cracks the problem. And this happens again and again. But however, there are still, therefore, a lot of problems that remain unsolved, and they are waiting for the next generation of brilliant minds. I hope some of the young minds that I'm looking for to solve these problems are in this audience, and they will be able to crack the two problems that I'm going to look at today. Okay, there is a very peculiar respect for among mathematicians for those, if somebody poses an interesting and challenging problem, he is highly respected. The great German mathematician, Georg Cantor, used to say that to ask the right question is harder than to answer it. In mathematics, the art of proposing a question must be held of higher value than solving it. So to propose a challenging problem is a great art and a great talent. Most of these problems that are posed are in the form of a conjecture. What is meant by a conjecture is you almost propose the solution, and the solution looks very almost true, but nobody knows how to prove it. It looks like it with all reasonable, it should be true, but however, no formal mathematical proofs are found. Such things are called conjectures. There are many, many conjectures in mathematics, and for mathematicians, these conjectures are like Mount Everest, unconquered, highest peaks for a mountaineer. Most of the time, a large part of the mathematical
Sir, it looks like you are muted or we can't hear you.
Okay.
This one was already seen.
Yes, sir.
What about this one?
Yeah, sir. Here we had a problem. We had just started with this particular slide.
Okay, so the idea of this, I will try to now rush up. Please allow me for the last time. Okay. Okay. So basically, therefore, what I wanted to say in this slide is that the person who proposes the conjecture becomes more famous than the person who actually solves the problem. Just like the Everest mountain is known by the name of Everest, even though he never climbed the Mount Everest. Okay, so the proposer becomes more famous. The more time the problem takes, the more difficulty in the problem solving, the fame is more to the person who proposed the conjecture. So in the early days, people used to exchange letters, then give lectures, or through research papers, they exchanged these interesting problems between themselves. But Hilbert, in the beginning of the 20th century, changed the dimension of exchanging this problem by his lecture in the ICM, the International Congress of Mathematicians in Paris. What Hilbert did was he proposed 23 problems which should take the attention of the mathematicians of the 20th century and which he thought very important. Even though in such lectures addressed to conferences, keynote addresses, people talk about their work and the important problems that they have solved, Hilbert chose to talk about unsolved problems and set a new trend and thereby set the agenda for the 20th century mathematics. So as I said, Hilbert proposed 23 problems, out of which only 10 he could present in the conference because of the time limit. And then later he published the 23. There was a 24th problem that was found much later, much later after his death. Many of these problems have been solved, but some of them still remain to be resolved because some of them are even vague. Okay. All the full list of the problems can be found in the bulletins of the American Math Society, as the reference I have given below. Okay. Just like Hilbert led the mathematicians into the 20th century by his lecture and the list of unsolved problems, people thought, can we do a similar thing to lead the mathematicians to the 21st century with a list of unsolved problems? Then the Clay Mathematical Institute came up with this idea and appointed a board consisting of very well-known mathematicians, Pons, Joff, etc. Many of them are Fields medalists or some award winners. And after consulting several mathematicians, they came up with 7 problems with a prize amount of $1 million for each problem. These 7 problems are the so-called Millennium Problems. These are the 7 problems. Each one of them requires a very special domain knowledge, and both from the audience as well as from the speaker. I do not claim to have any expertise in any of these problems, and this is not the place where, but any professional conference in mathematics, if somebody talks about unsolved problems, it will be some of these problems that people will talk about. That is left for very highly professional mathematicians. Of these 7 problems, for the last one, the Poincare conjecture has already been solved at the beginning of the 21st century by the Russian mathematician Perelman, and promptly he refused the $1 million prize. This only goes to show that mathematicians don't care much for money. They solve these problems mainly because they're interested in this problem, the challenge it throws, the thrill it gives, and the joy it gives to them. Money is secondary to them. So the $1 million has no meaning to them. What is the aim of this lecture is to introduce 2 unsolved problems, which are not in the list of these Millennium Problems, but still carry $1 million prize. So the difference between the Millennium Problems and this problem is they still carry the $1 million prize, but they are not in the Millennium list. I do not understand why, but they are not in the list. It's a matter of choice. And the important thing about this is these 2 problems can be easily explained with very little mathematics background. Even high school mathematics background is enough to understand the problem. So that is my aim in this lecture. And in one of these problems, the prize money is even more than $1 million. In fact, so this is the highest prize offered to any unsolved problem in mathematics. The first problem I'm going to quickly get into is the so-called Collat's conjecture. And this was introduced by Lothar Collatz in the year 1937, which is about 84 years ago, and the problem remains unsolved even today. Okay. And there is a warning about, many people issue a statutory warning about these problems. In fact, Paul Erdős says mathematics may not even be ready for handling such problem. Lagarius, who has written a book in 2012, about 10 years back, on this problem itself, says it's an extraordinarily difficult problem, completely out of reach of present-day mathematics. Perhaps he feels that new mathematics has to be created to solve this. As late as September last year, the Quantum magazine called this problem the simple math problem we cannot still solve. There are several prizes offered to this. First, Coxeter offered $50 in the early days. And then Paul Erdős himself offered $500. Then the German, the British mathematician Twitter offered £1,000. But recently, on July 2nd, 2021, this year, about a few months back, the MIT Technological Review even questioned whether even computers can solve the problem or not. Are the computers really ready to solve this notoriously unwieldy math problem? Then the biggest prize offer came very recently. A Japanese company offered a prize of 120 million Japanese yens to whoever solves this Collatz conjecture. And this was announced on July 7th this year. And 120 million Japanese yen, as it's written at the bottom, is a little more than $1 million, $1,085,000. So this is the highest prize for any unsolved problems in mathematics. So this problem carries the highest prize on its head. This problem is generally referred to as the Collatz conjecture. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Hello?
sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, because I was not sure about the internet. Now and then I have to check. Okay, many names are given to this conjecture. If there is any problem, you call me. Okay.
Okay,
This problem is known as the Ulam's conjecture, Kakutani's conjecture, Syracuse conjecture, Twitter conjecture, depending on from whom the one came to hear about this problem. It's done by different names, but it is now officially known as the Collatz conjecture because original proposer was Collatz. What is this problem about? This is a problem on iteration or a dynamical system. So what is iteration? It simply means do the same thing repeatedly. For example, take a calculator, enter any positive number, then go on pressing the square root operation repeatedly and observe what happens. If we start with 1, you keep on getting 1. Square root of 1 is 1, square root of 1 is 1, square root of 1. If you start with 0, again you will keep getting zeros. But suppose I start with 4. First I will get square root of 4 is 2. Then square root of 2 is 1.41, etc. Then square root of that, square root of that, square root of that. I go on getting these numbers. And finally I see I am converging towards 1. Eventually, your calculator screen will show repeatedly the number 1. So what happens in general for any n? If we start with n, which is different from 1 or 0, we eventually get attracted towards 1. If we start with 1, we stay at 1. Square root of 1 is 1, square root of 1 is 1, and so on. If we start with 0, we stay at 0. So many things can happen when we do these iterations. In this example, the iterating function was the square root function. What Collatz suggested was a different function for iteration. So you do, again, start with the number n. If the number n is even, then you calculate n by 2. If the number n is odd, you calculate 3n plus 1. So that's why this problem is called a 3x1 plus 1 problem also. Okay. So how does this iteration go? It starts with the number. It calculates half that number if n is even. If it calculates 3n plus 1 if the number is odd. Start with any positive integer and then go on calculating fn, f of fn, then f of that, and so on. So we get a sequence of numbers like this. What do? I put a number, I input it, I get a number outside. What is the number that I am getting outside? Fn. If I input n, I get output fn. So I go on looping it and keep on getting first in output, second output, third output, and so on. And I get a sequence of numbers. Okay. Every step, every iteration gives a new number. This sequence is called the collage conjecture, collage sequence. So let's look at some examples. Suppose I start with 1. Now, the rule says if you start with if the number is odd, you must take 3n plus 1. So 3n plus 1 is 4. Then the rule says if the number is even, you must take half of it. If the number is even, take half of it. If the number is odd, take 3n plus 1. So you see 1, 4, 2, 1, 1, 4, 2, 1. We get that sequence. Suppose I start with 3. 3 is odd. So if it is odd, the rule is 3n plus 1 and then 10. But 10 is even, so half of it. 5 is even odd, so 3n plus 1. Even, even, even. So again get into that loop 4 to 1, 4 to 1, 4 to 1, etc. Start with n equal to 5. I'll give you several examples to understand it. So 5 is odd, so 3n plus 1, which is 16. Now even, so again I get into 4 to 1, 4 to 1. Start with 6. 6 is even, so 3. 3 is odd, 3 times, and we have already seen 3. So that sequence comes. Again, you see at the end, you end up with 4 to 1, 4 to 1, 4 to 1. With n equal to 7, odd, 3 times that plus 1, even, so half, odd, so 3 times that plus 1, even, half, odd, so 3 times that plus 1, even, so odd, so 3 times that, so even, half, even, half, even, half. So again, I come, we have already seen if we start with 5, you get to the sequence 4 to 1. Similarly, I get this. So a number of examples are there. You start with 14, halfway through 7, then 3 times that, and so on. You keep on doing that. Finally, you get to 4 to 1, 4 to 1. That seems to be that this 4 to 1, the tail appears again and again. Similarly, here you see I have given the answers for, if we start with 31, you go through a lot of steps, but finally, at the end of which, you come to 4 to 1, 4 to 1. Now we can draw this as a graph. You go up, down, up, down, up, down, down, up, down, down, up, down, up, and so on. These numbers keep going up and down, finally making a descent to 4 to 1, 4 to 1, 4 to 1. Okay. If you start with 27, this up and up and up, it goes all the way up to the number 9,232. After 111 steps, it starts coming back to the loop 4 to 1, 4 to 1, 4. So you can build a tree like this for any number. If you now look at this number 34, for example, whether I start from 44 or whether I start from 28, whether I start from 56, I will come to 34. Once I come to 34, the route I will follow is only this. So you can as well think that the game has started at 34 all over again. So the moment I come here, it forgets where it came from. This is a memoryless program, dynamical system. It doesn't matter where it came from to 34, but once it came to 34, this is the route that it will follow, and eventually come to this 4 to 1. So you can build a tree, huge big tree, describing all these movements. Now the important thing is, with all these examples that we have seen, that we see that at the end we come back after a finite number of steps, we come back to the loop 4 to 1, 4 to 1. It's a 3 cycle in the dynamical systems language. It's a 3 cycle, 4 to 1, 4 to 1, 4 to 1. Or does something else happen? Maybe a bigger cycle happens for some other starting point. Maybe when I start with 1 trillion, who knows? I am not sure whether it will come back to the 4 to 1 cycle. Maybe it goes to a K cycle, or maybe never goes into a cycle, keeps going up and down, up and down, up and down, never settling down. So nobody knows what happens for large numbers. Collage conjecture states that at the end of the day, after a finite number of steps, you will always come back to this 4 2 1 4 2 1 4 2 1 cycle. Whatever number you started with. This is what he proposed, he conjectured, and to this day, nobody knows the answer. The idea is the following: in the proof, what one should do is, whenever we reach, when we started a number, after finite number of steps, can we come below that number? See, for any initial value n, is there a number of step called kn, such that at the end of the kn step, we have arrived at a number which is smaller than n. If this happens, then we are sure. We start with n, became below n, then from that below n, we can go further below n, and so on, and so eventually we will come to 1. This is obvious if the starting value is even, but if it is odd, we do not know what happens. If this fact that whenever you are at an odd number, we will after a finite number of steps, but this has not so far. Okay, so the Collatz, if you want to check, if you want to work on Collatz conjecture, well, you will have to start checking numbers if you want to, but one information I'll give you is the numbers up to 2 to the power of 68 have all been checked through various methods using computers, etc. So for all these numbers, from whichever number you start from 1 to 2 to the power of 68, you will always come back to the loop 4 to 1 after a finite number of steps. So all these initial values started from 1 to 2 to the power of 68 will eventually lead you to the cycle 4 to 1. But that is only up to these numbers known. Nobody has given a proof so far that whatever n, after a finite number of steps, the loop 4 to 1 will be reached. This is the Collatz conjecture, that whatever n you start with, and if you apply the Collatz rules, after a finite number of steps, you will come to the loop 4 to 1. Prove or disprove. Collatz conjectured that this is true. So either show that this is true or show that this is false by showing some initial point for which we never come to the 4 to 1 loop. This conjecture is now open. So far, not much progress has been made. There are certain rules, certain results that are available, but they are nowhere near the answer to the question that we are seeking for. A few comments about this conjecture. First of all, Collatz worked on this in the 1950s. Finally, he told Helmut Hasse, a famous mathematician at Hamburg. Collatz was also at Hamburg in Germany. He explained this problem to him, saying that for a decade I have been working on this, nothing is happening. Every time I come back to this 4 to 1 loop. Then Hasse, when he went to US, he took that problem to the Syracuse University and explained it to them. Then this famous Ulam got involved with it. Kakutani and all these mathematicians at the University of Chicago got interested in this problem. And there's even a rumor they started spreading that this problem has been deliberately created by the communists so that the Western mathematicians will not work on any serious mathematics. All this were all recorded. But the fact of the matter is, this is a very serious problem and nobody knows the answer. Jeffrey Legarius says this is a dangerous problem. You get obsessed with it once you start working on it. And our Kannan Soundararajan, a well-known Indian mathematician at Stanford, he said, we really don't understand much about this problem. Terence Tao is a young genius. He became a professor at UCLA at the age of 24, the University of California at Los Angeles. He had obtained recently some interesting results on the problem, but not still anywhere near the solution to the problem. He calls it an occupational hazard and so on. And he says you could get obsessed with this problem and that you can waste a lot of time on this problem. Here are several other comments on this. It's a siren song, fall under its trance, and you may never do meaningful work again. But all these people seem to be negative in their approach, in the sense it's a very dangerous problem, don't get into it, and so on and so forth. But I tend to somewhat disagree with them. I would rather go by the advice of the Professor Bolobos at Trinity College, Cambridge. He has an advice for mathematicians, young mathematicians, that in your professional career, you should have two types of problems on which you work on. One, you should always have a dream problem, a very big problem that you would love to solve, but you have very little chance to solve. But still keep working on it. It improves your thinking power, it improves your logical reasoning, it improves your mathematical background, it keeps you challenging it, and so on. And so this collage problem can be chosen as one of your dream problems. But the other problem is to survive in the professional world, you have to publish, you have to get some results and so on. So choose some worthwhile problem which you think you have a good chance of solving. So that's the best approach. You keep on progressing in your professional mathematics, but spend a day every day with one problem like the collage problem. Who knows, one day you may crack it and become famous more than getting the $1 million. It is the thriller, solving the problem by the way, there is a book called The Princeton Companion Mathematics. There is a chapter called Advice to a Young Mathematician. Several well-known Fields medalists and Nobel laureate, Fields medalists and very good mathematicians have written as to what their advice to young mathematical researchers are. It's worth reading. Okay? It's a very nice piece of advice. We have Atiyah, Timothy Gowers, and others writing in that, Bolobos and others. It's a very nice piece for one to read. If anybody wants to read from the beginning about the collage conjecture, I would advise that first take a look at this book by Jeffrey Legarius. It came about 10 years back. He calls it the ultimate challenge, the 3x plus 1 problem. And he has written a nice, the book is nice and also contains several of the important papers that have been written on this particular subject. So the first $1 million problem, which is outside this millennium list, is the collage problem. And it is really a very mysterious problem. Does not seem to fall under any category. Nobody seems to know how to get a handle on this problem. So maybe somebody very young can think about this problem, come up with a completely new novel approach to answer Collage's question, whether whatever initial value we start with and follow Collage's rules, whether we will end up with 4-2-1 loop. Okay. That's the first conjecture I wanted to say. I have to rush through because of all the technical difficulties. I'll make a few comments before I go to the other problem. There are certain variations and generalizations for this. The first one is, instead of only positive integers, you can also work with negative integers. Like for example, if I start with -2 and start applying that rule, half of -2 is -1. This is odd. So 3 times that will get you to -2 and you'll get into this loop. So there is one loop which is simply going between -2 and -1. And there are other loops that you start getting. There is another loop which is 5 cycle, -5, -14. You will go into this loop from wherever you start in this. So now we get more loops. If you allow negative numbers, 2 more loops are added to this problem. Collage considered only positive initial values. You can also allow negative initial values. Then you get 2 more loops in addition to the collage loop. There are 3 loops. Now we have to prove the problem that these are the only 3 loops. I will skip this. One small, the collage conjecture, the iteration can also be written in this form. See, the cos squared pi by 2n is 1 when n is even, and therefore when n is even, I get n by 2, and this part is 0. And when is odd, this is 0 and this is 1. So the two formulas can be written in one line like this. N by 2 cos squared pi by 2. The Collat's conjecture, Collat's iteration can be written in this. When you write in this format, you see that instead of n, the integer, I can even put real numbers there. So I get a generalization of that. I replace the n by x. I get a new problem, a new iteration now. Start with any initial value, real value number x, and go on doing x by 2 cos squared pi by 2 x, etc. And see what happens. And that has also been tried in 1996 by It's a Dynamical System by Chamberlain, and all kinds of interesting things happen. There are many things that one can read on these things, but once you start reading Lagarius's book, you'll be automatically led to many other things. I will not go beyond this. I will stop with this extension. So you can start with Collat's conjecture, which is only with positive integers, or you can generalize it with negative integers. You can generalize it with real numbers also. Also, you can make it complex. Instead of x being real, you can take f of z equal to this pi by 2z sine squared pi by 2z. Then you get some very nice fractal problems. So there are very interesting iterations that come out of this if we go to higher and higher generalization. So, but to start with, I would advise you to restrict yourself to the original Collat's conjecture, positive integers, and the rule halve it, if you make half of it if n is even, and take 3n plus 1 if n is odd. Keep on doing it and show that you will always come back to 4 to 1 loop after a finite number of steps. So that's the Collat's conjecture. And the next problem, this is the problem which has the highest, this Collat's conjecture is the problem which has the highest prize money in mathematics so far. Okay. The next problem I would look at is very simple again. It's called the Beal's conjecture. Just like the Japanese company has offered $1 million, over $1 million for the Collat's conjecture. It's an individual by name Beal, Andrew Beal, who has offered $1 million prize for this problem. This is called the Beal's conjecture. What is the Beal's conjecture? Look at this. You see a excuse me. You see a right angle triangle, and more importantly, the sides of the triangles are 3, 4, 5. So the sides of the triangle are 3, 4, 5, right angle triangle, and therefore 3 squared plus 4 squared equal to 5 squared is the Pythagoras theorem. Hypotenuse squared is equal to sum of the squares of the sides. So now you see that I have a triple of positive integers a, b, c, a equal to 3, b equal to 4, c equal to 5, such that a squared plus b squared is equal to c squared. Okay. Such triples are called Pythagorean triples. So 3 positive integers a, b, c, such that a squared plus b squared is equal to c squared is called a Pythagorean triple. Okay. So that is the definition. A triple a, b, c of positive integers such that a squared plus b squared equal to c squared is called a Pythagorean triple. So what this says is in ordinary language is sum of two perfect squares is equal to another perfect square. A perfect square plus a perfect square is equal to another perfect square. Example, 3 squared plus 4 squared is equal to 5 squared, 6 squares plus 8 squared is equal to 10 squared. Now look at these two examples deliberately wrote. The second example is essentially the first example, except every A, B, C have all been multiplied by 2. 3 is multiplied by 2, 4 is multiplied by 2, 5 is multiplied by 2. So essentially it is the same example but by multiplying by a common factor. So we are not interested in this common factor multiplication. That is a very obvious operation. So we would like to remove all common factors that they are called primitive. So if ABC is a Pythagorean triple, then any multiple of this is also a Pythagorean triple, because a squared plus b squared is equal to c squared implies Ka whole square plus Kb whole square equal to Kc whole square. So we are interested only in those which do not have common factor. So these are called primitive triples. For example, 3, 4, 5 is a triple. 5, 12, 13 is a Pythagorean triple. They don't have any common. 3 and 5 don't have any common. 5, 12, 13 do not have any common factor, and therefore it is also a primitive triple. 3, 4, and 5 do not have any common factor. So a Pythagorean triple is called a primitive Pythagorean triple if A, B, C are co-prime. That is, they don't have any common. Euclid showed that there are infinite number of Pythagorean triples, and he constructed them as follows. Simply write like this. He says choose A equal to m squared minus n squared, B equal to 2m, and C equal to m squared plus n squared. It is by using a simple algebraic formula, A plus B whole squared is equal to A squared plus 2AB plus B squared, A minus B whole squared is equal to A squared minus 2AB plus B squared. Add them, subtract them, you get all kinds of formulae. And then from that you get x minus y whole squared plus 4xy equal to x plus y whole squared. This is a square, this is a square, but this is not a square yet. 4 is a square, but xy is not a square. If this were a square, I can write square plus square equal to square, and I get a Pythagorean number. So in order to make this a square, I will make x a square and y a square, so that this becomes a square. M square, 4 times m squared n squared. So I will call this as A, call this 2mn as B, and m squared plus n squared as C. So I'll get A squared plus B squared is equal to C. So I will have to choose m. I want all positive integers, so I choose m greater than n. And I don't want any common factors, so I'll choose one as odd and the other as even. And I don't want any other common factors also, I choose them. Then Euclid showed by giving different values of m and n, you can generate all the primitive Pythagorean triples. And once you have a primitive Pythagorean triple, you can multiply it by a constant, you get other non-primitive Pythagorean triples. So Pythagorean triples have been there, or been around for a long, long, long time. So what is the generalization? Now what is Pythagorean triple? It says sum of two squares is equal to a third square. Sum of two perfect squares is equal to a third perfect square. So we can ask, we can get sum of two perfect cubes equal to a third perfect cube. Why only squares? Why can't I ask sum of two perfect cubes equal to a third perfect cube? So I can ask whether I can get ABC such that A cube plus B cube equal to C. Since we can cancel common factors, we can always ask for primitive ones. Okay. So in general, instead of cubes, we can ask fourth powers, or in general, nth power. Can we get ABC such that A to the n plus B to the n is equal to C to the n. A, B, C must be positive integers. For n equal to 2, we get the Pythagorean triple. What we are interested in is for n more than 2. So n equal to 3 or 4, third power or fourth power, and so on. Now the famous French mathematician Pierre de Fermat in the 17th century wrote in a note in his copy of the book Diophantus Arithmetica, Diophantus of Alexandria's book called Arithmetica. He said that you cannot get 2 cubes add up to a third cube, or 2 fourth powers add up to a fourth power, and so on in general, any n, 2 nth powers adding to 2 nth powers. And he wrote, I discovered a truly remarkable proof of this theorem, but this margin is too small to contain it. So mathematicians since then have made several attempts to find them. Unfortunately, though Fermat wrote that I have a beautiful proof, but the margin is not enough, but he didn't write it anywhere else. So this remained a mystery. So this many mathematicians started working on it for several centuries. For 3 centuries, they remained unanswered. And finally, this problem was known as the Fermat's last theorem. And so let me explain what it again says. A positive integer a, b, c is called a Fermat n triple if a to the n plus b to the n equal to c to the n. the nth powers add up to the nth power. Of course, they are interested, n is greater than or equal to 2. Because n equal to 2 is, of course, the Pythagorean. Pythagorean triples are Fermat 2 triples when n equal to 2. Fermat's last theorem says when n is greater than 3, there is no solution. You cannot get A, B, C, that A to the n plus B to the n equal to C to the n when n is greater than or equal. But A, B, C positive integers. Though Fermat did not prove it, it is still called the last theorem, as though he had proved it. And this theorem got proved. Fermat stated it in 1637, and this got proved only in 1994, 357 years later. So little, almost like 4 centuries, 3.5 centuries it took to prove what Fermat said. He had a proof, but he could not write it in the margin. Of course, I'm going to look at a further generalization of this. So first we had sum of squares equal to square. Then we asked whether sum of cubes will be equal to cubes. Sum of 4 powers will be equal to 4 powers. And Fermat said no chance. Beyond Fermat okay. So instead of now asking sum of nth powers being equal to nth power, see, look at what is in that equation. The first term is an nth power, the second term is an nth power, the right side is also an nth power. All are nth power. Suppose we allow them to be different powers. First term is an mth power, second term is an nth power, the third term is some pth power. So we say sum of 2 perfect powers equal to a third perfect power. We don't care whether they are the same powers, but sum of perfect powers. So a perfect power plus a perfect power equal to a perfect power. So for Pythagoras was perfect square plus perfect square plus equal to perfect square. Fermat said perfect cube plus perfect cube equal to perfect cube, not possible. Perfect nth power plus perfect nth power equal to perfect nth power, not possible for n greater than or equal to 3. So now we are saying forget about all powers being same. Some power plus some other power equal to some other power. Power plus power equal to power. This was the question. So if there is an ABC such that A to the m plus B to the n is equal to C to the power of P, we call it an MNP triple. Okay. So what we have is the Fermat n triple is n triple. We wanted all powers to be the same. M to be M, N, and P should be the same. Now let's look at some example. Here is, for example, a square plus a cube equal to a square. So 1, 2, 3. A is 1, B is 2, C is 3. It is a 2, 3, 2 triple. M and P. M first power is 2, second power is 3, third power is 2. Similarly, a fifth power plus a square equal to a fourth power. A cube plus a square equal to the ninth power. This is another example. Seventh power plus third power equal to a square. This is another example. Fifth power plus fourth power equal to a square. Another example. Some more bigger ones. Seventh power plus third power equal to a square. Third power plus square equal to seventh power. Eighth power plus third power equal to square. 8 power plus square equal to 3. So here are a number of examples where a power plus power equal to another power. Perfect power plus perfect power equal to a perfect power. Okay, these are some examples that are connected with another conjecture called Fermat-Catalan. I will not get into it. But what we are interested in is from these examples, which says, well, we can make power plus power equal to power. We may not be able to make same power plus same power equal to same power, but some power plus some other power equal to some other power, that is possible. These are all some examples for this. Let me list the examples again and ask a question. What do we observe in these examples? If you look at these examples, in this example, there is a square. Here is a square. In this example, there is a square. In this example, there is a square. 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 All these examples have at least one square. Can you consider an example in which all powers are more than 2? No square is there, only cube onwards is there. So in each of these examples, at least one of these powers is 2. Andrew Beale asked the following question. Does there exist a triple in which all the powers are greater than or equal to 3? Okay. Well, of course, all equal to 3 is not possible because Fermat's theorem says cube plus cube cannot be cube. But you can change. One is third power, one is, and Beale said we cannot get such an answer. He said, he conjectured that you try, I challenge you, you will not be able to get that power plus power equal to power with all the exponents being more than or at least 3. Okay. And either prove my statement or you find an example where a power plus power equal to a power where all the powers are greater than or equal to 3. And this was known as Beale's conjecture. He stated it is about 28 years ago, and it still remains unanswered. Nobody has been able to either prove that what he said is right or what he said is wrong by getting an example where it's the power of 1 plus b to the n is equal to c. Now, Beale was not a mathematician. He was a self-taught, he was a Texas. He was interested in a bit of mathematics undergraduate. And 93, he stated this problem, and it is known as Beale's conjecture. So far, nobody has found this solution to this conjecture. And he became a banker, a Texas banker. He became very rich. His assets are valued at about $10 billion. And 4 years after he proposed the problem and no progress was there, he wanted to entice people to work on this problem. He offered a price of $5,000. Nothing happened. He slowly went on increasing the price. And in the next 10 years, by 2007, he had brought it to $50,000 price. Still nothing happened. And about 8 years back, in par with Clay mathematics problem, he personally funded the prize for $1 million, deposited the money with the American Mathematical Society. And it is still lying there. Nobody has solved it. So if you want $2 million, there are two problems: solve the Collard's conjecture and solve the Beale's conjecture. Now, these two problems are problems which are not a part of the Clay problems, as already mentioned. But many mathematicians work on this problem not because of the million. There are many, many, many more interesting problems unsolved still remain, which do not carry $1 million prizes, but still people work on them because the challenge that it throws at them. I discussed some of these non-millennium unsolved problems in a set of 3 lectures sometime back, and these were sponsored by a couple of institutions. And if anybody is interested, I can give you the link for these 3 lectures. In that also I have discussed Collard's conjecture, probably a little more than what I have discussed today. But I have not discussed Beale's conjecture in that lecture, so I discussed there. And in fact, 1 or 2 problems by Indian mathematicians, Pillai and Ramchandra, are also discussed in those set of lectures. If anybody is interested in looking at them, if you send me an email, I will send you the link for listening to those 3 lectures. I think I overstepped my limit. These are the 2 problems I wanted to discuss. I would very much hope that some of the youngsters in the audience will take up the challenge and resolve these problems. I'll be more interested in their excitement and the solution. And then, of course, the $1 million is always welcome. But it is the challenge and the excitement that one gets when one solves these problems the great joy is. Like, for example, Perelman refused the $1 million prize for solving Poincare conjecture. He was even offered the Fields Medal for his work. Even that he refused. He said, I got the greatest pleasure while solving the problem, and nobody can beat that. I don't want any other prize. But anyway, the world being what it is, there are always prizes offered. And here is $2 million an offer for you. You are free to work on these problems. I think it's the right time to stop. If you have any questions, I'll try to answer. I don't claim to know the answers to all questions, but if you have any questions, I will try to answer. Now I'll hand it over to the organizer.
Participants, if there are any queries, you can unmute yourselves and ask the question.
Great.
If there are any questions, you can unmute yourselves and ask.
No questions. Good.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
So in collapse conjecture, even under residue class, saying say under Z over 9Z, where Z is a set of all integers, does the pattern 4 to 1 to
No, I told you there are two more cycles that are possible.
right? Does the
There are
cycle
three-
does it remain even under
There
the
are three
modular?
cycles. There are three cycles known. The question is whether these are the only three cycles or are there other cycles?
My question is, are these cycles preserved when we consider them as residue classes?
I'm not able to hear you
Like, for
clearly.
example, if I take Z over 9Z, the set of all residue classes.
Oh, then you're going to a different. See, there are only a finite number.
Yeah, does it preserve? Yes, then
Yeah,
will
so
be
one
just
of them will
finite
have to be
numbers.
repeated. So one of them will have to be repeated infinitely often because you are going to take. Suppose there are only 9 members. If you are going to make 10
Right.
iterations, you will have to repeat by the pigeonhole principle. You will have to come back to the same.
Yes.
Yeah, that's so the finite thing is not very challenging. The real challenging one is when you work with more interesting.
No, but does the
thing
cycles
is
preserve? Does the cycle preserve there also? Does the cycle preserve there also? Do you get the
even
4
more than a
bar?
See, if we start with a number, okay, you will come back to it. Therefore, that cycle will repeat. Okay. Any number, you will come back to it and keep repeating that cycle. So that is guaranteed that it will happen. Whereas
It might
in
get stuck in one of the
you
classes.
don't even know whether you will come back.
Right, correct.
That is the problem. When you are infinite, you can keep on oscillating higher and higher and higher unboundedly. That is, we do not know whether we come down. Whereas when you have a finite number of fellows, you are guaranteed you will come back. You're already guaranteed that you will
But
come back.
does it get stuck in one class, like one residue?
Yeah. There's really not.
It should.
Yeah, it should. Even if it does, there will be at most a finite number of classes. Okay.
Right.
Yeah, so that is not really challenging. You can, by computer search, you can exhaust all the classes.
Right.
Okay. So even if it's a big modulo, this thing, you can always buy a computer. Once there are finite number, there is always this handle with the computer search. There is a hope that you can do this, but only when you're doing.
But at the class where it gets stuck, as in it repeats, that will have the same remainder. Some characteristics are preserved of every element in that class.
Your voice is breaking. There is some problem with the internet.
I believe there's a problem with it. It's okay. I got my answer. Thank you.
Okay. Your voice is breaking. Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions?
So nothing, sir. I just wanted to say I enjoyed the talk once
Hi,
again.
Shankar. Oh, hello, Shankar. How are you?
Yes. Yeah, fine, sir. What about you?
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, long time.
Do you now visit the institute or you're still at home only?
Now we see there is no difference between institute at home because for the last 1.5 years we have all been so-called working from home. Now, I have
Okay.
started going back to the institute. Last week I am going back to the institute.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
Nice, sir. Nice listening to the
Nice.
talk.
Oh,
Thank
yeah.
you.
Take care. Take care. Yes. Right.
Nice.
I'm sorry that I had to rush to many of these things because of the initial hiccup that we had with the internet or what. I don't know what was the problem. There was no problem with the internet. I could get in, but it was giving me the message back that something is wrong with my joining. So anyway, because of it, I had to rush through. But the videos are always there, and you can always go. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. On behalf of the Department of PG Studies and Research in Mathematics, St. Aloysius College, Mangaluru, it is my privilege to thank today's speaker, Professor Vittal Rao, for acknowledging our request and delivering an insightful talk on the topic. Thank you, sir.